The summer of 1985 was warm and bright in a quiet town in Illinois. On the morning of June 22nd, everyone in the town was getting ready for a wedding that had become the talk of the community. Cheryl Baker, a cheerful young woman known for her warm smile, was marrying James Whitmore, a quiet but kind man who had just opened his own small mechanic shop. Their wedding was held at the town's oldest mansion, a large white building with tall pillars and rose bushes lining the walkways. Cheryl wore a beautiful white dress, and James looked proud in his cream-colored tuxedo. The couple had spent months planning every detail. Their dream was to drive away in a bright yellow vintage Thunderbird, a gift Cheryl's late father had left behind. The car had been restored just for this occasion, and it sat in front of the mansion, polished until it gleamed like gold in the sunlight. After the ceremony, everyone gathered on the steps of the mansion, clapping and throwing rice as Cheryl and James stepped into the Thunderbird. The car had a "Just Married" sign on the back and tin cans dragging behind it, clinking on the pavement as they pulled away. They waved out the windows, smiling as they headed down the road toward their honeymoon cabin in Wisconsin. They planned to stay in a quiet cabin near a lake, away from phones and distractions. It was supposed to be the beginning of a long and happy life together, but they never arrived at the cabin. Days passed. Cheryl's mother tried calling the lodge, but the owner said the couple had never checked in. At first, people thought maybe they had changed their plans at the last minute. But when a week passed with no calls, no letters, and no sightings, Cheryl's parents grew worried and called the police. The police began searching along the highway they would have taken. Flyers with their faces were posted in stores, gas stations, and rest stops. Search teams walked through forests and along rivers. Helicopters flew over long stretches of empty land. But there was no sign of the car, and no one had seen them. Not a trace. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air. Friends came forward saying Cheryl had no enemies, and James was not the kind of man to run away. Their bank accounts remained untouched, and no passports were missing. Detectives looked into every possible explanation: an accident, a robbery, even the idea that they might have chosen to disappear. But nothing made sense. Their families held on to hope, thinking maybe someday they would get a phone call or someone would spot the yellow car on a back road. As the months turned into years, hope began to fade. Cheryl's mother never stopped believing they were out there somewhere, but James's father believed something terrible had happened. The case slowly went cold. The police had no leads, no evidence, and no one to question. The yellow Thunderbird was never seen again, and without that clue, there was no way to know where the couple had gone. People in town began to whisper strange stories. Some said the road to the cabin was cursed. Others believed the couple had been taken. But most simply felt sadness when they passed by the old mansion where Cheryl and James had smiled so brightly. Their disappearance became a mystery that haunted the town for years, a love story with no ending and no answers. By 1997, 12 years had passed since Cheryl and James disappeared on their wedding day. Most people had moved on, and many new families living in the area had never even heard of the missing couple. The once bustling town had grown quieter over the years. Cheryl's mother, now older and moving slower, still kept a framed photo of her daughter in the living room, beside one of James smiling in his tuxedo. She often sat by the window in the late afternoons, wondering what might have happened. The police had long since stopped investigating. The case file was packed away in a storage room at the station, covered in dust. Only one officer, a young man named Kyle Renner, had recently looked at it again. Kyle had grown up hearing stories about the wedding mystery, and now, as a new recruit in the local sheriff's department, he was determined to take one more look. Kyle was fascinated by old cases. He had a habit of staying late at the station, reading over unsolved files and thinking about what had been missed. When he opened the Baker's Whitmore file, he noticed something strange. There were no photos from the air taken during the original search. Back in 1985, satellite images weren't used the way they are now. Technology had changed a lot. Now, there were online maps, detailed satellite tools, and even archives of old aerial images. It gave Kyle an idea. What if the car had gone off the road somewhere no one had searched? A place that couldn't be seen from the highway? He decided to pull up old satellite images from the path between the mansion and the honeymoon cabin. At first, the search was frustrating. The images were grainy, and the trees blocked most of the view. Kyle zoomed in on old roads, rivers, and empty fields. Hours turned into days. Then one afternoon, something caught his eye. He was looking at a narrow, dark stream that cut through a thick patch of land several miles off the main road. The image was from the summer of 1997, recently updated. Just beside the water, almost hidden by overgrown grass and trees, was something bright yellow. It didn't match anything else around it. Kyle leaned forward, staring closely at the screen. It was the size and shape of a car, and the color was a perfect match for the Thunderbird. Kyle printed the image and rushed to the sheriff. At first, the sheriff thought it was just another dead end. But when they compared the satellite image to the photo of Cheryl and James with their car, it was hard to ignore. The angle of the stream, the shape of the car, and the nearby land matched up with the area no one had searched before. It was private property that had been closed off for years. An old farm had once stood there, but was now overgrown and unused. With the sheriff's approval, Kyle organized a small search team. They set out early the next morning, armed with the photo, maps, and permission to cross the land. The walk through the field was rough. Tall grass reached their waists, and the path to the stream was muddy. But as they got closer, one of the team members shouted. There, under a thick cluster of trees, was a flash of yellow metal peeking through. The bushes around it had grown wild, covering most of the shape. But when they cleared away, their mouths dropped open. It was a yellow Thunderbird. The car had been hidden there for more than a decade, just yards from the narrow stream. The tires were flat, the paint had faded a bit, but it was unmistakable. The doors were closed, and the windows were too dusty to see through clearly. Everyone stood silently for a moment, realizing they had just solved a mystery that had haunted the town for years. But as they looked at the car, something chilled them to the bone. No one knew yet what they would find inside. The team stood around the car for a long moment, not knowing what to do next. The yellow Thunderbird, once shining and full of life, was now sitting in silence. Its surface was covered in layers of dirt and leaves. One of the officers slowly walked up and tried the door handle. It was locked. Another officer used a flashlight to look inside to the driver's side window, wiping away some of the grime with his sleeve. What he saw inside made his heart sink. In the front seats, there were two shapes. Human remains, still dressed in what appeared to be a wedding gown and a tuxedo. The silence that followed was heavy. It was Cheryl and James. Their final resting place had been only a few miles from where they were last seen. The car had gone off a hidden bend in the old road, a part of the path that had been abandoned years ago and replaced with a newer route. The area was thick with trees, and the curve of the road was dangerous. Without a guardrail or warning signs, it would have been easy for someone unfamiliar with the road to miss the turn, especially in the late afternoon. As the investigators looked closer, they noticed that the front bumper had hit a large rock near the stream. It appeared the car had skidded off the dirt path and rolled down a small slope before stopping among the trees. The thick vegetation and private fencing around the property had kept it hidden from view for over a decade. After carefully opening the car, the team confirmed that the two bodies had likely died on impact or shortly after. There were no signs of foul play. No gunshots, no wounds, no struggle. Just a tragic accident. James was still buckled into the driver's seat, his hands resting on the steering wheel. Cheryl's hand was on his arm, and her head had tilted gently toward his shoulder, as if she had been looking at him when they crashed. Time had faded the colors of their clothing, but there was something deeply moving about the sight. Even in death, they were together, just as they had hoped to be on that special day. News of the discoveries spread quickly. Reporters from nearby cities arrived within hours, and soon national media picked up the story. Missing wedding couple found after 12 years was on TV screens and newspapers across the country. People who had forgotten the case were suddenly talking about it again. For Cheryl's mother, the news brought both tears and a strange kind of peace. She had spent every year wondering what had happened, fearing the worst but never knowing. Now, she finally had an answer. She visited the site with the sheriff and placed a small bouquet of roses near the stream. She said a prayer and whispered that she was glad her daughter hadn't been alone. The car was carefully lifted and taken to a secure location for further examination. Investigators reviewed the route and checked the weather records from the day of the wedding. It had been sunny, but the old dirt road could have had loose gravel or a hidden dip that caused James to lose control. The map showed that the curve they had missed had never been clearly marked. That road had since been decommissioned and erased from most maps, which explained why no one had searched that exact location during the early days. It was a perfect storm of bad timing, poor road design, and unfortunate luck. In the days that followed, the town held a memorial service. People who had attended the original wedding returned, many with tears in their eyes. The church bells rang softly, and 2 white doves were released into the sky. Photos of Cheryl and James were displayed near the altar, showing them smiling and full of life. For the first time in 12 years, the story had an ending, one that brought closure to a painful mystery, even though it carried deep sadness. Weeks after the discovery of the car and the remains, the town slowly began to settle back into its usual rhythm. But something had changed. The mystery that had hovered like a dark cloud for 12 years was no longer a question. People now had answers. Though the truth was heartbreaking, there was comfort in knowing that Cheryl and James had not been harmed by another person or made to suffer. It had been an accident, sudden and final. The sheriff's office filed its final report and closed the case. Kyle Renner, the young officer who had found the satellite image, was quietly praised by the department and the townspeople. Some call him a hero, but Kyle didn't see it that way. He said he was just doing what any officer should do, keep searching, no matter how much time had passed. Cheryl's mother held a small funeral, where both Cheryl and James were laid to rest together in the town cemetery. Their shared gravestone was simple, with their names, wedding date, and a quote Cheryl had once loved. "Together is a beautiful place to be." At the service, many people shared memories. Friends spoke about how kind Cheryl was, how she always laughed with her whole heart. Others remembered how James would fix neighbors' cars for free and help carry groceries for older folks. Their love story had touched many people, not just because of how it ended, but because of how it had begun, with joy, hope, and a bright yellow car full of dreams. The yellow Thunderbird was eventually placed in a small local museum, carefully cleaned and surrounded by photos and notes from those who had known the couple. Visitors came from other towns to see it. Some people simply stared at it in silence. Others cried. A few wrote letters and left them inside the glass display case. One letter read, "Thank you for reminding us that love, even when lost, can leave something beautiful behind." Students from the local high school began including the story in their history projects. Over time, Cheryl and James's story became more than a tragedy. It became a symbol of love, memory, and the importance of never giving up hope. Kyle continued his work at the sheriff's department, but he also started volunteering with missing persons organizations. He gave talks at schools and local events, reminding people that old cases could still be solved, even after many years. He told them that sometimes the answers were waiting in places no one had thought to look. He never forgot the feeling he had when he first saw the yellow shape in the satellite image, a feeling that still gave him chills. He kept a small copy of the photo on his desk as a reminder to always look closer. The old mansion where Cheryl and James had been married was later turned into a community center. Inside the entrance hall, they placed a framed photo of the couple on their wedding day, standing proudly beside the Thunderbird, surrounded by flowers and smiles. People who came to the center for dances, meetings, or celebrations often stopped to look at it. Some of the older townsfolk would quietly tell the story to children who didn't know it, passing it down like a legend. Years later, a new road was built near the area where the car had been found. The dangerous curve was finally marked, and the land was made safer. A small sign was placed near the stream, reading, "In memory of Cheryl and James, may love guide us safely home." Every spring, wildflowers began to grow there, covering the ground in colors. It became a peaceful place, where people sometimes left flowers or tokens of remembrance. Though their lives were short, Cheryl and James left a lasting mark. Their love, captured in old photos and remembered by so many, showed the world that even in the face of great loss, love still mattered. It reminded everyone that behind every mystery is a human story, a story worth telling, remembering, and honoring.